Hello out there. Welcome back to GM Prep of the Abomination Vaults. I am DMSteve. Tonight we're continuing our series of taking a closer look at just what is inside the Abomination Vaults anyways. In this episode, we're going to pull away from the Ruins and the Gauntlight to take a peek at the second major setting of the adventure path, Otari. Depending on the style of game you run, it may be a town that is just kind of referenced as like a background sort of location that isn't too important. Maybe it's just a place they go to buy and sell stuff. But even if that's the case in your game, there is enough stuff in the module, in the adventure, the town, its characters, its history ties so close into the campaign directly. It's a good idea to at least have a cursory knowledge of the understanding of the town, its characters, and how all these pieces connect to the adventure path. So there's a lot to cover tonight. Otari is really ingrained throughout all three parts of the adventure path. It's kind of become the focus of development for Paizo in general. We have the beginner's box, troubles in Otari. There's some Otari scenarios or bounties, and now the Abomination Vault. So there's plenty of meat on these bones. So it can be a bit much and a bit overwhelming to understand everything. So instead of trying to make sure you understand every little bit, all I'm going to do is distill it down into the most important things you need to know to run the Abomination Vault. So let's jump in. We got a lot to cover tonight. And first off, let's give a quick overview of the town itself. This is Otari in all its glory. It is a fairly small I don't want to say fishing village. It kind of was a fishing village in the past. Nowadays it's turned into a lumber town. So its main feature is this sort of log flume that goes from the town all the way up to the forest that allows the loggers to transport the wood from the forest directly to the town for faster processing, which enables it to kind of be a competitor on the scale of the entire lumber industry in the whole continent. Actually, not in the continent, the whole world. And it was this invention that sort of revitalized the town. And so almost everyone that lives here has something to do with the lumber industry, either directly supporting the lumber people or becoming a lumberjack themselves. Okay, so you got the lumber town, you got the marketplace down here where open town market, you can pretty much find all your adventuring gears. Graveyard is up on the cliff, overlooking. It's kind of ignored by the town. Nobody wants to go to the graveyard, but it's the scene of an important thing at the start of chapter 2 in Ruins of Gauntlight, where the undead start rising and creatures are summoned to fight your PCs. So you'll definitely want to foreshadow that a bit. There's actually a stat block for the town. So let's see. Where is it in my journal? Abomination Vault, Ruins of Gauntlight, Otari. Is this the stat block? No. No, there's a lot of entries. Otari at a glance. No. So where is the stat block? Huh. I'm not actually seeing it. Here it is. Otari Settlement. So Otari is a settlement 4. So per like the settlement rules in Pathfinder, if a town has a level of 4, that means you should be able to find all gear up to level 4 in this town, which is a pretty sizable amount, right? Especially when you're starting the adventure. But the interesting thing to note here is it has a special ability called Trinket Trade that says Otari has a long tradition of catering to adventurers, and consumable items of up to level 10 are available. So even though this town is level 4 and maybe you can't find a lot of items above that level in town necessarily. It's up to you as a GM. Consumable items go up much higher, so potions and things of that nature is kind of their bread and butter here. So definitely remember that they can get higher level than that in terms of consumables. And as a GM, it's up to you to think what can and can't they do here. You pretty much want to make sure your players love this place and stick around. So if they're going up to level 10, maybe let the town grow with them. Overall, the town is a very welcoming place. It's very sort of catering to all kinds. They're not discriminatory against any like ancestries or classes or ideologies or gods. I mean, they have their own sort of pantheon that they worship, but not anything they straight up hate. There's one exception to this rule that's called out in the book, and whether or not you want to lean into it or not, it's up to you. But the town is really kind of against city slickers. They look down upon people from like Absalom and the big city coming into their town, and like, they might get not the best service. So if you have any players from the big city or Absalom here, maybe lean into that a bit and make them feel the cold shoulder. And if you have a small city folk or, fisherman type character, let them feel the love. So as a quick review, I know I covered this in the first video where we talked about the entire adventure path, but I wanted to give just a background again for what this town kind of went through, because as it relates to this story. So, and especially not just the story, but Belcora, the main villain, and the Rose Guard, who were the adventurers who fought Belcora, 500 years ago. So, the Rose Guard is a group of 4 heroes who grew to fame in the nearby big city of Absalom that we were just talking about. Absalom, the big city, is the actual target of Belcora's ire. And so the heroes from Absalom made their way all the way out to this mysterious lighthouse to confront her before defeating her. Ultimately, one of their friends, one of the 4 Rose Guard, died in the process of defeating her, and that was Otari Ilvashti. Otari Ilvashti. After their victory, they decided to settle down and start a town nearby. So back then, 500 years ago, this town didn't exist. It only sprung up because the Rose Guard decided to give up the adventuring life and build a town here, not too far from the lighthouse. And because their friend Otari died in battle, that's what caused them to honor his name and legacy by naming the town Otari. Okay, so who were the Rose Guard? Well, the Rose Guard had 4 members in it. They were all human, which is convenient because that means none of them could still be alive based on the 500-year time scale. So first we have Asaphina Menhems. She was a cleric of Aristil, who never really liked the big city life. And Aristil is sort of like a goddess of the wilderness, or the god or goddess, I'm not sure, of the wilderness. And so, that sort of like rugged, shun city life and embrace sort of the rural life, which leans heavily into her starting this town, right? We have Otari Ilvashti. He was the rogue of the group. He was an optimist who kept others helpful even during their darkest times. Rest in peace, Otari. We also have Vol Rajani, who was the fighter of the party. She was a capable and no-nonsense swordwoman who claimed to be exiled royalty. And more than that, she was exiled from her, long-lost city, and took a blade with her that's kind of became her namesake, which is the cooperative blade that takes place during this adventure, which we've mentioned. Welcome, Phenomenally CJ. I gotta say, I know we haven't really talked about it that much, but we made affiliate on Twitch for the first time just about 2 weeks ago. We haven't even streamed and announced it on stream fully yet, but Phenomenally CJ, you were the first person to give us a subscription, and so thank you for that. That's awesome. I didn't even have to like announce it. You just saw it and was like, take this subscription. So we like that. We got some more, subscriber, what do you call it? Not badges, but, oh man, emotes coming. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be awesome. All right, and the last of the Rose Guard was Zarmav. These are hard if you don't say them out loud, right? Zarmavdian. So Zarmavdian was the wizard of the group. Loved a good conspiracy theory, obsessed with the occult, obsessed with divination magic. Not entirely unlike Rin in this manner, right? But that was the classic group: cleric, rogue, fighter, wizard. Went out, defeated Belcora. Otari died. They settled down. They start this village. Okay, the fishing town flourished for a bit, though it never really swelled past 100 people or so. And each of the three adventurers that survived, right, they all lived a fairly peaceful existence, dying of natural causes, which is very unnatural for an adventurer to do. The last of the Rose Guard to pass was Asaphina Menhems, the cleric, and when she passed, the town's luck began to dwindle. And within a few years of her passing, the town was completely abandoned. And Otari was no more. Eventually, kobolds moved in and sort of took over the town, began luring ships in to the town for safe harbor, attacking them, scavenging them, and it became, a trap for sailors. And Otari lost its name and its good graces, and basically lost all meaning and existence and knowledge. Much later, a group of adventurers came along and reclaimed the town. They took it back from the kobolds, they drove them out, and now the town was returned to civility. In this case, it was actually backed by Asaphina's granddaughter, another Menhems, and she transformed the abandoned town from the fishing town it was before into the lumber town that it is today. She's the one that invented the flumes that brings the trees from the forest down to the village, up that steep slope that was really hard, for them to transport. The loaded ramp that is powered by the windmill that takes it down to the actual harbor. She's the brains behind all of that. And with that guidance, the town began to flourish again. And ever since then, Menhems has basically been at the helm of the city. And I like to believe that the town's superstitions are that, only a bloodline of the Rose Guard can bring the town the luck it needs. And because of that, Menhems has held the title of mayor ever since. I don't think that's explicitly stated, but it makes sense, right? When the Rose Guard died, the town collapsed, and now that the bloodline descended, awesome, which is pretty cool. So, because of that, we have the descendants, and now we have Osef Menhems, the current mayor of the town. Okay, and that's the history of the Rose Guard and the town of Otari up to today. Okay, so why is that important? Okay, the town is central to a few major plot points, side quests, and quests that come up in all the future books. So I wanted to highlight them real quick to let you know everything that is connected from this town back into the adventure. So, firstly, it's obviously the catalyst, right? It is suggested at the start of the adventure that Rin be the person who pointed the adventurers towards the lighthouse in the first place. She's not working on behalf of the town. She's just recognizing that something's up and wants to sort of kick off the adventure in that way. And if you use like the thing we talk about how I started the adventure, she's much more integral into that starting and making the kind of first contact that your players have in the town. So with that being said, the town is the catalyst for the adventure to even begin in the first place. The Gauntlight, right? The Gauntlight is the lighthouse, obviously. At the start of chapter 2, the lighthouse activates and begins raising dead in the graveyard down here. Okay? This is actually just a test run for Belcora, making sure the lighthouse still functions after all these years, and Otari just happens to be collateral damage in the way. So once this happens, the mayor, Osef Menhems, will offer a 50 gold bounty to each hero to make sure that the lighthouse never shines again. And so this is when the PCs really get fully vested in solving the mystery and having a actual monetary reward and quest towards driving into the lighthouse, and that of course takes place because of Otari. We also have the 4 heirlooms of the Rose Guard. So the way the adventures is structured, right? There's 4 levels in the dungeon, and then they can't get past level 4 to go deeper because there's a magical barrier that has kind of appeared since Belcora resurrected. So CJ is asking, by the time they finish the quest, 50 gold is gonna be very little, right? Well, it's intended so they can stop the lighthouse from firing at the end of the first book. So that's by like level 5 or so. So after the first 4 levels, they can stop the lighthouse from being able to fire at that point, at least in the short term, which would give them the 50 gold reward around level 4 or 5. So it's not nothing, but you're right. It's not the greatest sort of thing. It's also 50 gold each instead of 50 gold total. So it's a little something, I guess. So anyways, to get past this barrier down deeper, they need to get the 4 heirlooms of the Rose Guard themselves. Okay. Luckily, because the town is so ripe and so integrated with the heritage of the adventurers, all of the heirlooms are handy and they have access to them in the town, mostly. Otari's lockpicks, which is his item, are on his dead body in the ruins themselves on the 4th level. Aesopina's religious symbol is her hunter's brooch. That's available it's in a music box just kind of put away in the mayor's mansion. So they can get it there. Actually, I think, let me see. I wonder if there's a way to show, let's see, items. Maybe they're in the equipment. Let's search the companion and see if they're in there. Because these are like magical items, and I think it'd be cool to like look at them too. So here's the hunter's brooch. This is hunter's brooch. This is the thing that is Aesopina's thing. So once per day, you can use a 3-item action to touch the weapon you wield to plea for Aristo's hand, and it gives the weapon a deadly D12 trait for what is it? For 1 minute, and it also against undead, it bumps up to fatal D12. So that's pretty powerful, right? And also, while you're wearing it, you get the disrupt undead cantrip as an innate spell. Since they fight a lot of undead in this adventure, that's nothing to sneeze at. Okay. We have let's see, Zarmavdian. That's a hard name to say. Zarmavdian's spellbook is called the Threshold of Truth. Luckily, Morally Bent has a copy of this spellbook, or has the actual spellbook in his personal collection. So make sure that, well, so make sure that they know this, that he has an affinity for books, and they can go asking him when the times come. And if they're able to be on his friendly side in some capacity, then he could probably teach them how to handle like rare books and loan it to them for the quest. And the same thing for the holy symbol. They should have met the mayor, which is easy to do because it kind of kicks off the adventure. But they need to have some way to sort of know that the mayor have met with him so they can go ask him, because he obviously descends from her, about it, and he can lead them in the right direction. The last of the 4, well, let's see. So that was the Hunter's Brooch, the lockpicks. Oh yeah, so the lockpicks are just, I think they might be like +1 lockpicks or something. Threshold of Truth is a spell book, right? So it unlocks a bunch of spells that they have access to, cantrips, first level, second level. But unless you have like a sort of spellcaster in your book, you're probably not like a wizard. You're probably not going to get too much use out of this, but it does provide access to an archetype called the Eldritch Researcher. So anybody who gets that book can then unlock this archetype if you haven't made it available to your players anyways. Which is, so it's just dedicated to like learning knowledge and about the occult. And it's again, this is like a conspiracy theory, a crazy guy spell book, so it's a little out there. Okay. And then lastly, the one that's made an appearance, if you've seen my adventure, is the Cooperative Blade. So the Cooperative Blade is right now it's on display at the Dawnflower Library. It's a +1 striking longsword, and while you're wielding it, you get +2 checks to aid your allies. That's cool. If you're using aid, it gives a +3 circumstance bonus. Oh, sorry, it's a plus. Oh, if you critically succeed, you can give +3 instead of +2 to the bonus. So it kind of gives that sense of helping your allies, and also it's just a +1 striking sword, which is pretty cool. And this is the longsword that belonged to Val Rajani back in the day, which is an important heirloom in that bloodline that they were exiled and ran away from their old kingdom with. So even though this blade mechanically is not anything to really like alter history, in the core lore, it is a pretty important blade for sure. And so this is on display at the town's library, the Dawnflower Library. But the night before, it's kind of like the MacGuffin or whatever, but like the night before that they learn they need it, right, to open this ruins, the town's blacksmith, Carmen Rajani, heir to the sword, breaks in the library, starts a fire, breaks the case, takes the sword, and flees, which will lead to them having to track him down on a chase and then face him with a tough choice on how to proceed. Because remember, he's not wrong. It belongs to him by blood. Just because the town's mayor is currently in possession of it doesn't mean he has less right to it than the mayor should, right? He's not entirely wrong. He's just, for lack of a better word, he's just an asshole, and nobody really likes him, so nobody sides with him. But your PCs might, right? So they can either like kill him and take it back, or have him arrested and bring him back to town, or let him go but borrow the sword temporarily. It really is going to provide an interesting choice for them about how to proceed, which segues in to the fourth major plot point tied to this town, which is Carmen Rajani's soul. Yes, his soul itself. So in the second part of this adventure path called the Hands of the Devil, there's a contract devil named Eurivian who basically is stuck in a contract that he knows is crap, where he has to raise an army to invade the town for the surface for Bokora, but he doesn't really want to. But his contract says he has to, so he has to. And he'll march on Otari and destroy it. But depending on how they deal with Carmen in the beginning of part 2 with his sword, this whole situation, they have a tough choice on their hand, because Carmen Rajani, or specifically the Rajani bloodline, is so important into these quests, and his bloodline is important to devils for some reason. It's not truly explained as far as I've seen in the lore. They have the choice, in order to break Eurivian's contract with Bokora, he needs the soul of a Rajani, and he can't do it directly. He can't have subordinates do it, so he needs the PCs to give them his soul. And in exchange, he'll give up his contract with Bokora. He'll give up raiding the armies, his whole army on the surface. All it takes is one measly soul. So if they've already killed him, they can go back to the place they killed him and trap his soul. And if not, they can find a way to hand him over. Or the alternative is to fight this contract devil straight up, defeat him, and then proceed further in the dungeon. He's kind of the final boss of part 2 of the adventure, of the 3-part adventure path. But because Carmen here is so central to 2 of the quests in part 2, the beginning and the end, it's important to introduce him to your players and get them to know him by name before he suddenly steals the blade and just disappears. It's more interesting if they've met him and know him, and that's a better way to play it. So he's barely mentioned in the first book, right? Because they were kind of written by 3 different authors in different order. So they mentioned that he's going to make a move for the blade in the second half, and then the second half comes around, it's like, oh, by the way, he's super important to the plot. So make sure you guys work in Carmen Rajani as soon as you can, and either make him likable, make him not likable, make him unlikable. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just important that he's central and your players know who he is to make the real impact of part 2, I think. Okay, so those 4 are the major plot points in the town. In the third part, where they're actually facing Bakura, the town doesn't have a lot of it's very much focused on the inner politics of the last few levels and fighting Belcora. There's not a whole lot in book 3 that ties back to the town, so we're just mostly focused on the first 2 books in the adventure path. Whew, that's a lot of talking. Okay, so what's next? Well, there's a lot of side quests in Otari. And so side quests in the adventure, I don't know if this is a thing in all adventure paths or just this one, but it's a small side quest which gives characters a bonus 30 points of experience if they're able to complete something for some NPC that wants them to do stuff. And there are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 side quests directly tied to Otari. So it's a good idea to know what these side quests are. That way, you can introduce these NPCs to the players and let them come in organically, right? Okay, so first side quest they'll probably come across that's tied to this town is the Thieves Guild, right? So there are a group of captured thieves that are currently being held hostage on the 2nd level of the dungeon. The Thieves Guild works out of Crook's Nook, which is here on the bridge, and it's run by Yin Yasmera, who, she looks like this. She's the Thieves Guild runner or owner. She's willing to pay them for the return of her trusted employees. And the book gives you guidelines to say like 50 gold if they can return them alive or bring back evidence that they're dead. So they're currently held on the 2nd level by the Morlocks. If you have any sort of shady type characters in your group, she's a good contact to work in as their contact in the adventure. If you've got nothing but goody two-shoes type characters like paladins and clerics, lawful good that want nothing to do with crime, let them find their way there naturally from that white bird symbol. They have a tattoo that marks them, like a white osprey. It's like a little bird. They all have tattoos. It's carved into the boats they can find. Let them unravel that organically. But if you've got a character who knows who the Thieves Guild is and probably has contact, they should already know who she is, more than likely. And if they don't know who she is, have them find her and have her play into that sort of hero crap by offering them a reward and kind of hiding that their true nature are thieves, right? Just maybe say they're treasure hunters or she's the adventurers that she hired. They don't have to mention, hey, my thieves are down there, right? Besides, they're acting more like treasure hunters than thieves. The whole thing's a little flimsy, in my opinion. Like, why are thieves going after a treasure in the 2nd level? But it does allow you to tie it back to the town. So, yeah. The fact that they're still alive is nothing short of a miracle. Okay. So that is the Captured Thieves quest. The way you can latch it in, if you have a shady character, just say, hey, I heard you're poking around the lighthouse. I wanted to let you know I got a business opportunity. Some of my crew went missing. If you can find them and return them, I got a little cash coming your way, right? That's a good way to do it if you got a thief. And if you don't, let them stumble into the boat with the symbol, make the check. I think there's a society check they make. They can tie it back to the actual restaurant, show up to the restaurant, and unlock the side quest. Either way, you're going to want to introduce Yin Yasmera early on to do that quest. All right, the second quest is Odd Stories. So that is Morley Bent's store. Oops. Morley Bent looks like this little like redhead wizard guy. I don't know if he's bald and he just wears the cap to like cover his bald spot, or if he just wears that as part of his religious studies. I'm not entirely sure. But Morley Bent, he's eccentric, right? He has a desire for books like all wizards do, and the Gauntlight ruins are full of them. The way it works is he offers the PCs a list of books, and they don't give you an actual list of titles, but he hands them a list of like, here are like 100 books I want. These are on my collection list. He gives the PCs the list and says, keep your eye out. If you ever find these books, I'll pay you for them. No questions asked. Pay handsomely for them. So the PCs go into like certain rooms, especially the 3rd level of the Gauntlight is like the library level. So there's books all over. So they can spend some time, they spend like 15 minutes of time, do an investigation check, and try to recover some of these books. Like literally the PCs are looking along the shelf and cross-referencing the list, like, oh, this is one Morley Bent wants, right? Pull off the shelf, throw it in a sack, and you can recover X number of bulk in books at a time, and he just pays by the bulk. Mechanically, he pays by the bulk, although realistically, in the lore, he's paying for specific titles. That's the way it goes. They can't just like pull every book back and just dump it to him. But make sure that your PCs, right, if you're going to introduce a side quest, you're going to want to make sure that the PCs know that he likes books, know that he's into books, and even maybe if they've talked with him, have him offer this quest willingly. Like, hey, if you see any of these books, just keep an eye out and bring them back. I'll pay, right? Like, kind of like a druggie wanting their fix, right? Like, he wants his books. Because it doesn't really work if you're down there and like they don't know who Morley Bent is, they don't know who this character is, or they like books, and you're like, oh, by the way, there's these books. Maybe the wizard back in town wants to buy them. It just really is like ramming it down their throat. So organically work Morley Bent's obsession with books, and even possibly have him straight up offer the quest. Give your characters that incentive. Okay, so that's the book side quest. Third, werewolf side quest. Okay. So this ties into two places here. So in the Otari market, there is Kalino Lathaner, who had his wife murdered by a werewolf years and years ago. Oh, James Jacobs has a talent for NPC names. That's what I heard. Yeah, so he wrote a bunch of good names, but I'm having trouble saying them out loud. But I heard Rin was one of his PCs, and he kind of retooled the PC into an NPC in this book and kind of made her this figure, which is pretty cool. And he wrote the first part. I think he wrote the Ruins of Gauntlight, if I'm not mistaken. So, very awesome, Golbus. So anyways, Kalino Lathaner had his wife killed by a werewolf years and years ago. And he's now has a shrine to her in the marketplace. He pines over her, but he never really forgave the druids outside of town because the werewolf kind of came from within their sort of circle. So once a year, he has shuts down the marketplace and just has like a celebration for his wife. But the interesting thing here is that the werewolf, even though they ran it out of town, it jumped off a cliff and presumably died, the werewolf is still alive in the lighthouse. So if you have PCs who have met this guy, who've talked and know about this werewolf story at all, then it's going to have much more weight to the side quest of, finding, like basically there's, if you haven't seen the story and heard the story or have any indication that this werewolf means anything to the town, when they slay him, they're not going to know to follow up and give him the closure that he kind of desires, right? So there's a locket that you can find that proves that he's the werewolf that killed his wife. So without that key piece of information, it's just going to seem kind of strange. So make sure to at least if your players are in the marketplace, you need a little role play beat, mention the little shrine, and then you can follow it up by having them, learn that this guy's wife was killed by a werewolf, and he can even tell the story and how much he hates druids, and he's lost all humor because of this. And the interesting thing here is not only does this side quest tie into the Otari market, it also ties up here to the Stone Ring Pond, because the druids there, they feel bad because they kind of were the reason they let this guy come into their midst. He turned into a werewolf. He killed the town. So they feel guilt, right? So now they were kind of atoning for that and trying to restore the relationship with the town. And so you can kind of give them closure because they believe the werewolf's still out there. And it brings this werewolf story much deeper and much more connected rather than, oh, there's a random werewolf in the lighthouse, kill him, we get our experience and move on. So you're going to want to drop these as storytelling beats anytime your players are at these locations. All right, the fourth side quest, kind of a big one. It's a missing son. So Brelda Vankervel, she runs the Rowdy Rockfish, which in my game the PCs spent a lot of time there. They were the current home base, although they've kind of shifted back to Yinyas Maras and the Crooksnook. They've kind of turned the dark side, I guess. But anyways, she's running this tavern because her son went missing about a year ago, and now she's stuck running it. She still pines for her son. She still believes he's out there, but she doesn't know where he could be. He just went missing. He would go on long walks every morning, didn't return one day. In actuality, what happened is he was kidnapped by Belcora's goons, and they have him deep beneath the gauntlet. They have him on the 4th level, and he is the power source for the lighthouse. So the lighthouse is turned back on. It's glowing blue. It's because they're yanking his life force out and drawing that energy to recharge the lighthouse. And because he's got this dwarven nature, he's extra hardy, which allows him to survive it better than anyone else they've tested it on. So he's kind of become a prime reason why the lighthouse is able to get so powered up. Yeah, so he's like key to the Belcor's plans, right? So if your PCs don't know who this guy is, right? If they don't make the connection that, oh my god, he's the son of a NPC that we love back in town, they're not going to care too much. I mean, they'll care, right? Because they'll save him because they want to turn off the lighthouse. But there's less emotional investment of like, oh my god, we found this lady's son. Let's return her to him and like set that family right. So make sure if your PCs ever stop into the town, they get into the crow's the Rowdy Rockfish. They hear the sort of sob story about her missing son, and it'll give a little bit more connection to who this dwarf is when they find him in the first place. Also cool because when you rescue him, you return him, and I believe she gives a sort of what do you say? Like it's like a family heirloom, which is like a shield in their family over to help them. Yeah. So Golbez is saying, what do you think that would be the long-term psychological effects for him being repeatedly harmed and healed? I see him as being broken, maybe even touched by Nimbeloth. I definitely like that idea. There's no way you could be this going through this for torture for months and not be like hurt. Like I feel like he's gonna be, when they find him, probably more like shallow, hollow, broken version of himself. If that's too heavy for your group, you can just play it off that he's got his heavy, his dwarven ruggedness, which allowed him to survive, allowed him to shrug it off, and maybe put up that stoic sort of front. But if your players are into that sort of like broken role play, psychological stuff, definitely make him more broken, and maybe he has to be healed over time and return to his former personality. I think it depends on the tone of game you're trying to run. But the idea of him being touched by Nimbeloth, I hadn't really considered that. I like that idea. One of the sort of ideas of Nimbeloth is that there's like 7, I believe it's 7, like dots that like kind of touch, where like the tentacles spread out into like each tentacle has like 7 fingers, I think. So maybe when you find him, if you want to lean into that, just have like the blue light coming out of him be like 7 dots that leave like a scar on his chest. That'll kind of foreshadow the Nimbeloth stuff, and it's probably not a bad idea. So I hadn't actually considered that. That's a really interesting and cool idea to lean into for sure. Okay, and the last side quest in town is one that's based around nightmares. So this is Osif Menhem's. He's got a daughter, Doriana. Once they are able to open the vaults, right? Once they go down, they get the heirlooms, they unseal the lower level of the vaults. There's a creature down there. Well, let's say this. She surprisingly doesn't get a lot of actual screen time. Oh wait, I'm skipping ahead. Oh yeah. Once you unseal the vault, right? Quote unquote unseal the vault. It allows a creature that's down below that has psychic abilities to kind of finally reach out into the minds of the town. And the mayor's daughter, Doriana Menhem, teenage girl, she's kind of like budding and like having her psychic awakening, right? So once this creature is no longer constrained, he can get in her mind and start giving her nightmares, right? The downside being, if you never mentioned her before, or you never had like the mayor introduce his daughter, or they never met her, there's no way they would ever know what's going on or care that this girl's having twisted, tormented dreams. And in some cases, they might not want to, right? Like, this is definitely one of the most detached plots
from the main storyline, it's definitely a big side plot that's actually worth 80 experience. So most side quests are worth 30. This is worth 80. But in order to facilitate this, your characters are going to want to know who she is or care who she is. And then if they don't know who the mayor or her is, they're not going to recognize that the behavior's changed, in the second book of the adventure path. So in that case, if you plan to use this side quest, just drop her in, like have her like come find, like what I did is I had her come find the PCs on behalf of the mayor. And then when she came and brought them, he's like, "Oh, is my daughter, nice, and introduce you." Just have her be like a bumbling normal teenager. And I'm having like a dinner party, and I'm gonna have her play central in the dinner party scenes, so they know who she is. So when something goes wrong within the second part, they're more invested in the side quest, I guess. But out of all the side quests I've mentioned, this is the most optional, right? But it's good to know that you would want to introduce her if need be. The creature down below is a denizen of Leng named Yasan Claire. I guess that's pronounced right. It's very hard pronunciation. But if they get down there and start recognizing this creature, or if they're able to help, there's some rituals they can do to see what it is. It'll just make the story a little deeper, I think, for them. But out of all the side quests, for sure, that is the most optional, not as important to actually get into. Okay, we're getting there, guys. We're almost through this. So we've gotten through the side quests, we've gotten through the major plots. Now let's jump into the major players, because obviously there's a near infinite number of NPCs you could put into this town. I want to highlight the ones that are most important in terms of the major plot points, the side quests, and the things you're going to want to foreshadow before introducing them. Okay? So number one, off the bat, Rin Savinsky. Good old Rin. While she is a catalyst for starting the adventure, she surprisingly doesn't get a lot of screen time or tie into the actual plot. She is an expert on the occult, right? She has an expert rating in occultism. She's got a plus 12 in occultism. She's got a plus 12 in astrology lore, but she has a plus 16 when it comes to spirit lore specifically. Hence her fascination with ghosts. So my suggestion is to take her, is to make her a really good source of the occult and the ghosts, and make sure your PCs know this, especially if they have a gap in this expertise, right? That she could be the way to kind of give them the information that they're missing. So let Rin be the one that kind of unravels this mystery for the ghosts if your PCs aren't figuring it out on their own. What I'm toying with is the idea of having Rin be here in town, not because she cares about righting the wrongs of Belcora, but just because she's like interested in the occultum aspect itself. She's read about Nimbala. She's tempted by them. She's curious to see if there's any truth to them. If you look at her alignment is chaotic good, so she shouldn't be evil. But I plan to have her sort of interested in Nimbala, interested in Belcora, interested in the book she has and stories about Nimbaloth, to sort of have her be tempted by the book's called The Whispering Reeds. It's like a collection of stories. I'm gonna have her be tempted by this book and the knowledge, right? So when if she gets access to it or given to her by the PCs, it's gonna kind of consume her and maybe corrupt her a bit. And part of this, so like, I have, with COVID, we haven't done anything with my family for like a year. So this last week, we're finally all vaccinated. We took a trip to Joshua Tree. I live in California, so Joshua Tree, beautiful place, right? I've never been there. We stayed in like a house by ourselves. It's so dark there. When you look up at the sky, you see so many stars that I can't see from my house. It's kind of mind blowing. It's almost like a little bit of life changing experience. Not too crazy, but it was intense. And I was sitting there just in the dark, letting my mind wander. I was thinking about Rin. Rin's an astrologer. She loves the stars. She loves studying the astrology. And I was imagining looking up at the sky and saying, like, what's out there, right? What I'm trying to figure out. And I was reminded of a story I read in the lore of Nimbaloth, which actually says that Nimbaloth is an outer god. So they got the pantheon of the normal gods. The outer gods are these creatures that are so foreign and so old and so incomprehensible, even to the gods. Nobody could even possibly know what they want or what they want to do. And Nimblaz is one of these. But it's said that their hunting grounds, like the place they live, or not the hunting grounds, but the place that they live, is the void between the stars. So as you're looking up at the sky, and Azrin's been so focused and so obsessed with the stars, her mind kind of is drawn from the stars to the negative space, and maybe that's where she starts getting obsessed with the occultism, the spiritual, the spirit lore of the outer gods, and maybe that's why she's kind of interested in them, because they tie in her astrology lore, and she's kind of going down this dark, not dark necessarily dark path, but she wants to know more. The downside being this book that she's seeking really corrupts people, and she wouldn't stand a chance. And that brings her back into the story a bit and allows her to have a place in later adventures, and just fleshes her out and makes her slightly more interesting. She starts off really interesting, and I was kind of disappointed how she fell off real fast. Anyways, that's my suggestion. That's what I'm planning on doing. If you're interested in stealing that, let me know how it goes. I can show you real quick, actually, the Whispering Reeds is a pretty cool book. So it's an artifact, a level 10 artifact, so it's really powerful. It allows you to get like bonuses to recall knowledge about Nimbaloth. You can read a phrase for a book and target an undead, and they can take damage. But every time you like use this ability too much, you get exposed to this ability called like the Empty Death, which is a curse, and it kind of, it says every 7 days that pass after you, if you die while you're affected, you become a ghost, called the it's Empty Death, and every 7 days that pass after that, you have a chance of being consumed by Nimbaloth. So it's this powerful artifact that you can get, but it tries to corrupt your soul. So you want to use it, but the more you use it, the more corrupted you get if your willpower's not strong enough. It's going to be an interesting sort of way to like tie that in with the story. But anyways, in the lore, it's a collection of stories about the outer gods, about Nimbaloth. Some are true. It was in the lore. It was actually started by people who wanted to put together like warnings about Nimbaloth, and it morphed and corrupted them so much that it's become like a fairy tale book of like sucking people into it. So it's like the stories have so much power themselves. So I think it works for Rin. All right, enough about Rin. I've spent too much time. The Mayor Osoph Menhem. So he provides the payment, and he provides the hook to logically drive the heroes into the ruins to sort of make sure they get started. His daughter comes into play, and it's a big quest opportunity in Chapter 2, like I talked about. Since he's the mayor, it's very likely that your players will already come face to face with him. But really, the tough choice I see here is, do you want to make him likable or not? You can play up his politician side and make him, a bumbling idiot who takes advantage of his bloodline. Or you can have him be, a cutthroat, like good person who wants the best for the town. Either way, right? Really how you handle this, the most important thing to figure out what you want to do is handle how he looks at the cooperative blade, because that's really the key piece that drives the plot forward, right? The blade belongs to the Rajani bloodline, so it should be, by all birthrights, Carmen Rajani's blade. But since he funded his personal finding and return, he feels like he belongs to him. And in a way, he kind of does. He set an excavation, he paid for it, he brought it back. It's his blade. Not by birth, but by like monetary, like possession, right? There's no exactly clear right or wrong answer here, which is kind of good. But how you make him address this to the group will change how the party sees him going forward. So all you have to decide is, how do you want your party to look at him, or, how do you want him to tie into the plot, basically. So that's the important thing I think you really need to settle down with him, is how he really cares, how he justifies his ownership of the blade, right? In my case, my players don't like him because they see him as not much more than a figurehead, I guess. We'll see how it goes. All right. Carmen Rajani, again, he's the Blades for Glades guy here. We talked a lot about him in the previous section about the different the way that he's so important to the adventure, right? He's not mentioned like too much in the first book, like I said, but he is the key to the start and end of the second book in the adventure path. So you really, 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 I can't stress this enough, get him out in front of the PCs as early as you can. I don't feel like he's intended to be a likable character. He has talent, but living his entire life in anger has left him bitter about never reaching his full potential, right? They talk about how he's a great smith, but he would drink himself into stupor. He wouldn't actually, he would just like pass out drunk. He's really good with blades. He's got ties to the Thieves Guild, but anytime he starts getting ahead, he just kind of self-implodes on himself, which, I'm sure many people know. A lot of people like that in their life. So lean into that when coming up with inspiration for Carmen Rajani. I suggest having him be gruff, not much humor or happiness in him. If the players do get through his hard shell, right, show that he has potential, show that he has promise deep within him, show that he has a lot of potential and that he can be a good person, and then instantly shatter that and squander that goodwill. Have him appear drunk in the bars, passed out, have him picking fights with people off the screen. Really, the best advice I can give is just think about your crazy drunk uncle at every family gathering you've ever had and put that energy into Carmen Rajani. It'll make the choices in chapter 2 around his soul and the blade that much more impactful by having an unlikable character be the decision the characters have to make. I think that's what I suggest doing. Okay. For Brelda Vankervel, she's the dwarf who runs the not the Crooksneck. She runs the Rowdy Rockfish. She's the one whose son is currently being held hostage, right? Or not hostage, but he's the battery. He's the Matrix battery source for the tower. I like to play her as like a hollow woman. She's going through the motions of life. She's hopeful. She believes he's out there and he's going to return, but she's a grieving mom. It's important to have the story of her son get out there because everyone in this town would know about Lazda, and it'll give more impact to rescuing him and really cement the fact that these are the actual heroes of Otari and they're doing good in the town. One thing I'm going to do is I suggest if they stay there, having her have bad dreams, right? She has nightmares where she can just see her son crying out in torment, have her like describe the vivid blue flashes of light, just have her like stress how real it feels, and then she just can't sleep because when she dreams of her son in agony. And one thing I plan to do, right? You can steal this too, because I'm going to do it in an upcoming episode. As the party ascends out of the gauntlet, like in the middle of the night, have her hooded figure standing there, just staring up at the blue glow in the lighthouse. When they come and check on her, she'll be sleepwalking, and when she snaps out of it, she'll be angry because she was having a good dream for once where she was talking with her son. This can help you if your players like mine are having trouble sort of finding reason to push deeper into the ruins. Have them maybe realize there's something going on here. Give them a reason to go down other than just, well, the town wants you to go do it, so go do it. But if they're like, well, maybe her son's down there, maybe he's got something to do with this blue glow, maybe we really need to kind of focus our attention and go down there. It gives you a way to kind of put more of a clicking talk or put like a face on the dangers and on the gauntlet and let them know, hey, like just because you dilly-dally doesn't mean these people are just going to sit around and survive forever. You need to give it a face and give it a reason for your players to care, I think. At least my players, I feel like they're going to need that. So this is how I plan to drive that point home to them. All right, Morley Bent, again, he's the owner of the Odd Stories, the Wizard, bookshop owner, magical item proprietor, and oddity. Use him as a good source of the arcane to fill out the gaps that your party's knowledge might know. I'm using him to drive home the importance of the lighthouse. Oh, Golbez is saying Moss in his empty bedroom could be creepy. That's cool because again, Moss is like mossy skulls and things like that are sort of tied into Nimbaloth. And so having his bedroom have this creeping moss in there can really relate to that. I like that idea too. You got some good ideas. Like it. So Morleyman can fill in the arcane gaps that your party might not have. I'm using him to drive home the importance of the lighthouse. So if you saw our game, our players don't have a lot of arcane ability. He did this thing where he wanted to relive the moment that the thing was summoned into the graveyard, or like it would just appear. They don't know what happened. So he asked them to use the shared memory potion. He took one of the characters' memory so he could relive it. Let him be the one that kind of comes in and says, if your players don't figure it out, if they don't have the arcane minded characters who are interested in this, have him just be like, hey, guess what? The lighthouse, what I've learned is it was actually a conjuration effect. That creature didn't just appear, it was summoned by the lighthouse, and it used a lot of energy. And so the lighthouse probably has to refill. And he can even be the one that is like, by my calculations, the lighthouse recharges every 30 days or something like that. And then the PCs can be like, oh God, we have a literal ticking clock standing over the town, because if they are not able to stop it recharging before the 30 days is up, it'll summon a bigger, scarier creature next time. One where innocent people will die. So he can be the person that really lets them know, if they haven't found out that source of information, that the lighthouse is charging itself back up and it takes 30 days before the next blast can come. I think that's what I plan to do, at least. Because the lighthouse is ominous, but the players don't have any way to know they're on a clock unless you tell them. All right, last but not least, Yinyasmera back again at the Crook's Nook. She's the leader of the Thieves Guild, so she can either be a thorn in your PC's side or a boon, depending on how likely they are to play ball. Try to make sure that even when they are in her good graces, they should feel just how tenuous that relationship is. She only really trusts those who she has done business with in the past, and the PCs are only ever a means to ends with her. But she can remain a useful ally for any of those who are willing to work outside the law. But at the end of the day, she's going to be in it for herself and her people. And yeah, that's basically it. These are definitely the most important people. If you have to know just the bare minimum, those are the people you should study up on. There are lots of other minor characters, like the Captain of the Guard, the Priestess of the Dawnflower Library, the Druids of the Pawn, the Otari Marketplace, the guy whose wife died, the people involved in the logging industry and all their families. But if you get a good handle on just those 6 I mentioned, you'll be in a good place to get through the entirety of the campaign, and hit all the major plot points you need. And everything else is just gravy on top of all of that. I think that pretty much covers, at least what I think are the important things you need to know about Otari. So is in chat. We got a bunch of people in chat. If you guys have any questions or anything I didn't cover that you're interested in, or any more suggestions, Golbez, you've got a lot of really good suggestions going on here. And I like to see more things to get my brain sort of cranking. But any questions, shout them out. Otherwise, I'm just going to give another overview, right? If you're using this video series to help you run it, come in the chat, let me know how it goes. If you came up with something cool that you want to share, let me know, and I'll get that to you, to the masses, and share each other, help each other, build on top of what we're all doing, and build this cool resource for anyone running this adventure path, whether it's in a year, whether it's right now with me, whether it's in 5 years. I want this to be a good resource for the GMs so you never feel like you're going through this by yourself. Interesting point. I just thought of this. We talked about last week the in the Gauntlight ruins, right? There were the maggots. I don't think I have. Oh yeah, here we go. The giant maggot stat block, right? Pretty powerful. I talked about how they like really almost killed my PCs. Somebody pointed out something that I missed, and this is still the kind of stuff that I miss a lot. If you look at his senses, it has no vision, and it has tremor sense 30 feet. What that means is, if you can't see the person, then they're hidden to you. It's like a flat, I believe it was a DC 10 flat check to even attack in the first place, because there's a chance they just miss. The tremor sense is imprecise. It's not precise sense, so they don't know exactly where you are. So that means, even though they can attack and latch on and do a lot of damage, it's even easier to defeat them because they should have a flat check to even land the first blow in the first place. But once they land that bite, then they should rely on the grab, which does like extra damage and stuff like that. So that was a cool thing that I missed when I ran it. Maybe other GMs missed it when they ran it, but if you're gonna run it, just be aware that they have no actual sight whatsoever. All right, so to plug my campaign, if you're enjoying watching the GM prep side, we're running this campaign on Wednesdays at 7 o'clock Pacific. We play for 3 hours, so from 7 to 10 Pacific. We stream weekly. We're starting episode 13 this week. And it's been a little slow going. This week should have a dinner party scene where they're going to actually have to make a choice whether they're going to take the mayor up on his sort of offer to pay them 50 gold. They also have tried to set up something with Carmen Rajani to convince him to run for mayor, and then he can take over with them. We'll see how that goes, and I'm really excited to see them go back now that they have they got at some glimpse on the second floor of the lighthouse, and they're going to start exploring more. So join us for that. Oh, Gobis says he just finished episode 7 today. That's really cool to hear. You and the group are a great way to get more familiar with the adventure path and learn the rules better along the way. And that's exactly what we're going for, because like I said, when we started this, it was the first sort of dipping our toes into Pathfinder. As a bit of I don't know what you want to call it, but this week there was a Twitter response, right? Or like a Twitter thread in the TTRPG space. And they were saying like, if you get like, what do you think about like, what would you do in 5th edition or something like that when you get knocked off a cliff? Oops, now you're dead. And my first gut reaction was to like just use your reaction to use the grab an edge reaction, which is a Pathfinder thing, not a 5th edition thing. And it was the first instance where I realized, oh wow, my mind is getting acclimated more to Pathfinder 2nd edition than 5th edition. Because these days it's the only actual thing I'm playing. So I just thought that was funny. That was a little anecdote. I'm starting to get converted. I'm starting to see the light. And I'm starting to think like a Pathfinder GM. So that's definitely fun. Anyways, that's going to do it for tonight. If you've enjoyed this thing, make sure to give us a follow. If you got a Prime subscription out there, burning a hole in your pocket, send it our way. We're very appreciative of it. Give us a follow on Twitter. Give me a follow on Twitch and YouTube at DMSteve. On Twitter, you can find me at Steve the DM. I've got some resources. I did a video last Wednesday because we didn't get to play. I gave a setup on my Foundry and all the modules I use, and I even provided downloads so that you can import the stores I've created, because all of my stores, I showed here like little clips of my stores. I did a video last week where I showed how to build those and provided import files so you can have them as a good starting point with all the items pre-populated. So definitely go check out that video. It's called Behind the Scenes on my Foundry setup or something like that. Otherwise, I'm excited to get back to playing this week. I definitely enjoy Pathfinder. So see you guys on Wednesday for the stream, and we'll see you guys next Sunday. Oh, actually, let me just clarify. Next Sunday, I will not be available to run the GM prep stream. Memorial Day weekend. Like I said, my family is finally gotten all vaccinated. We're getting together for Memorial Day barbecue on Sunday night. I won't be available to stream, so you might miss out on my GM prep stream next week, unfortunately. But I'll be back. You'll see episode 4 coming your way, and in episode 4, I'm going to take a closer look at level 2 of the Ruins of Gauntlight, which is called the Servants' Corners. So take care. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.